Picture a city where 500,000 people are hungry every single day, not starving necessarily, not falling down in the street, just always, permanently, quietly hungry in the way that becomes the background noise of your whole life, so constant you stop noticing it until the moment it stops. Now fill that city with the smell of meat. Not good meat. Not the kind of meat that comes to your table pink and clean and smelling of rosemary and thyme. The other kind. The kind that's been sitting in a basket covered with a cloth since yesterday morning, in July, in a city where there is no ice and no refrigeration, and the temperature inside a cookshop kitchen runs to about 110 degrees from 4 in the morning until 9 at night. Add the smell of old fat. Fat that's been used so many times it's gone dark and thick and strange, sitting in a great iron cauldron over the fire, and everything that goes into it comes out tasting faintly of everything that went in before it. The eel pasties from Tuesday, the horse meat dumplings from last week, the thing that nobody asked about and nobody was told about, that went into the pot on Thursday, because the master cook needed to make the numbers work, and there was this thing in the back of the larder. Add the smell of the street itself. Because this is London, 1557, and the street is not a neutral surface. The street is alive. The street is a slow-moving river of horse dung and pig dung and human waste and discarded fish heads, and the runoff from the tannery 3 streets over that makes your eyes water at 50 yards. This street is where people throw their chamber pots in the morning, and where children play in the afternoon, and where dogs and pigs root through everything that's been thrown out, and where you will spend the next 12 hours pushing a wooden cart through the worst of it, calling out to strangers to come buy what's on top. That's Tudor London. The city that built Hampton Court Palace and wrote Shakespeare and produced some of the most elaborate banquet culture in human history, for about 400 people. The rest ate from the cart. We're going back there tonight. Not to the feasts, not to the great kitchens of Whitehall, where 70 cooks prepared 600 dishes for a court that expected peacock roasted, and then reassembled in its own feathers. Not to the accounts of what Henry VIII consumed in a single sitting, which are extraordinary and genuinely horrifying in their own right. We're going to the street. One day, one cart. The food you actually ate if you were a working person in Tudor London, and the reality of what was actually in it, which is the detail that every history book quietly skips over on its way to telling you about the swans. I make these history stories, and I genuinely do not know if you're falling asleep to them, or if you've just decided that 16th century food safety standards are the thing you need to think about at 11:30 on a Wednesday night. Both are valid. Either way, get comfortable. Close your eyes if you want. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, half a breath maybe, you've forgotten where you are. Then the smell hits you. It is not one smell. It's never one smell. It's a stack of smells, each one sitting on top of the last, layered like the sediment at the bottom of the Thames. First, fat. Old, cooled, congealed fat that has soaked into every surface of this room, into the wooden walls and the stone floor and the rafters above you and the straw you're sleeping on. Fat that smells almost like food, but not quite. Fat that smells like the memory of food, like what food leaves behind when it's been used up. Second, smoke. The fire in the cookshop above never fully goes out. It's banked down at night, smothered under ash, but it breathes. It breathes, and it sends a thin, steady trickle of smoke down through the floorboards, into the cellar where you sleep, so that by morning the air is grey, and your throat feels scraped clean, and your lungs have the texture of old leather. Third, the meat. There's always meat in the larder, which is the room through the wall to your left. Sometimes it's meat that deserves the name. Sometimes it's meat in the technical sense, which means animal tissue of some kind at some stage of its journey toward becoming something else entirely. Right now, in high summer, in the middle of July, the larder smells like something is making a decision. The decision being, am I still food or have I become something else? You've learned not to think about it too hard, and underneath all of it, underneath the fat and the smoke and the meat and the sourness of the sourdough starter, sitting in its crock in the corner, underneath all of it is the smell of the cellar itself. Earth and damp stone and the particular cold that comes from being below street level, below the city, below everything, and then, under even that, the river. The Thames is 3 streets away, and you can smell it even down here, especially in summer, especially at low tide. Salt and mud and fish and rot and the accumulated exhaust of a city of 500,000 people who use the river as everything. Highway, water source, laundry, sewer. Welcome to London, 1557, the reign of Queen Mary, the 2nd year of her marriage to King Philip of Spain, which is the most unpopular thing anyone has done in this country in living memory, a fact that makes the streets interesting and sometimes frightening. The year of the Marian persecutions, though you try not to think about that either. You're 16 years old. Your name is Thomas White, and you've been working for Walter Crisp, pieman and cook, of Cheapside Ward, for going on 2 years now. You came from Bedfordshire with your uncle's letter of introduction and a bundle containing 2 shirts, a pair of breeches, a knife, and roughly 4pence halfpenny in various coins that you'd been saving since you were 12. Your uncle wrote that you were a hard worker and a quick learner, and that you had no tendency to steal, which was the main qualification Walter Crispy cared about, because everyone he'd hired before had stolen from him eventually and he was done with it. You have not stolen from Walter Crisp, mostly because you've seen what he does with the meat. The church bell rings above you. Not close. The nearest church is St. Mary le Bow on Cheapside, a 5-minute walk, but its bells carry easily on a still morning. 5 o'clock, still dark. The sun won't properly rise for another hour. You have to be ready in 40 minutes. You get up without thinking about it. Your body does it before your mind catches up. 2 years of this has made the motion automatic. Roll off the straw. Stand up. Don't hit your head on the low beam. You've hit it twice this week already. You can feel the bruise above your left ear like a hot coal pressed against your skull. The floor is cold under your bare feet. Stone, slightly damp, always slightly damp no matter what the weather does above ground. You feel your way to the corner where your clothes are. Not much. A rough linen shirt that was white once, woolen breeches that stop below the knee, a pair of leather shoes that are more concept than reality at this point, held together by 3 separate pieces of twine and an optimism you've stopped feeling. You dress in the dark. You've done this enough times that you know the clothes by feel. The shirt is rougher on one shoulder where it's been mended. The breeches have a patch on the left knee. The shoes, you tie the twine carefully, because one of those shoes losing its sole on the street today means 6 hours of walking on stone in half a shoe. Which is not theoretical, which is something that happened in April, and which you remember with great precision. You splash water on your face from the wooden bucket by the door. The water is cold enough to make you gasp. It's been there since yesterday, brought from the conduit on Cheapside. You carried it yourself, 2 trips, 1 shilling for the right to fill your buckets at the public supply, which is the kind of mathematics that stops feeling insane after a while and just feels like the cost of being alive in this city. The water is slightly brown. You've stopped noticing that too. Up the stairs, through the door, into the cookshop. This is where you live, really. Not the cellar. Here. The cookshop is a single large room, low-ceilinged, smoke-blackened, organised around the central fireplace the way everything in a cookshop is organised around the central fireplace, because the fire is the point. The fire is the business. Everything else in this room exists in relation to the fire. The fire right now is a small, mean thing. Banked coals glowing orange in the dark. But beside it, bent over with a pair of iron tongs, is Agnes. Agnes is Walter Crispy's wife, and she starts the day before anyone else does. She's been here since 4. She's already got the fire breathing properly, already got the iron pot over the flames with yesterday's stock beginning to heat, already got her sleeves rolled to the elbows and her hair tied back under a linen cap. She doesn't look up when you come in. "Water," she says. "Pot's nearly empty." This means another trip to the conduit, another shilling's worth of queue. "Yes, mistress." She hands you the buckets. You go. Outside, London is already awake. This is the thing visitors never quite believe. If any visitors from your future should ever find themselves wandering the streets of Tudor London at 5 in the morning. The city doesn't sleep through the night, and then start in the morning like a sensible engine. The city never fully stops. The night shifts flow into the morning shifts the way one river current flows into another, without a clean break, without a pause, just a change in the quality of the movement. The bread bakers have been working since 2 in the morning. The fishmongers' boats were on the river before that. The slaughterhouses in East Smithfield started at midnight, and if the wind is coming from the east, which it sometimes is, you can smell them from here. Cheapside is the main commercial artery of London, the widest street in the city, wide enough for 2 carts to pass each other with room left over, which makes it practically a highway by Tudor standards. On a full trading day, which is every day except Sundays and the growing list of holy days, this street will hold 10,000 people by mid-morning. Hundreds of stalls, hundreds of traders. The noise will be extraordinary. Right now, in the grey pre-dawn, it's merely busy. Men are setting up stalls by torchlight. Women are carrying baskets from the river, from the fields, from the farms on London's fringes that supply the city's impossible daily hunger. A cart loaded with cabbages comes from the west, the horse's breath steaming in the cold July morning air. Even July is cold at this hour. It's always cold at this hour. And the carter is swearing softly at a dog that's sniffing at his wheels. You join the queue at the conduit, 10 people ahead of you. You know 2 of them by sight. John something from the bakery on Bread Street, and the girl with red hair who works for the goldsmith further west, and whose name you've never learned despite seeing her here every morning for 18 months. The queue moves slowly. The conduit is one of a handful of public water supplies in this part of London. The city has been trying to improve the supply for years. The conduit system, running from springs north of the city, is a genuine engineering achievement for its time. It still takes 25 minutes to fill 2 buckets. You carry them back. Your shoulders ache before you reach the door. Walter Crispy is awake by the time you return. You hear him before you see him, a heavy tread on the floor above, then the creak of the stairs, then the particular rhythm of his breathing. which you've come to know the way you know the sound of the fire and the sound of the street. Walter Crispy breathes like a man who has spent 30 years standing over a hot fire. Short and slightly wet. More air going in than seems to come back out. He's a big man, not fat, though he has a belly that speaks to a professional relationship with food, but broad, thick-necked. Hands that look like they were designed for a slightly larger human being and then attached at the last minute. His face is florid, permanently slightly sunburned looking from the heat of the cookshop, with a nose that's been broken at some point and healed at an angle that makes him look like he's perpetually looking round a corner. He looks at you. He looks at the buckets. Late, he says. You're not late. You've never been late. He says this every morning. Good morning, Master Crispy. He grunts, goes to the fire, bends over the pot the way Agnes bent over it 20 minutes ago, looks at whatever's in it, grunts again. This is his morning assessment. The pot passes inspection. The batch needs doing, he says. Lamb from the butcher came yesterday. It's in the back. Lamb. You have learned, in 2 years, not to ask Walter Crispy directly about the meat. Not because he'll lie to you. He won't. He's past that. He knows you know too much. But because the conversations become complicated in ways that are difficult to unhear. What lamb from the butcher means in this cookshop on this week in this summer, with meat prices what they are, and the Smithfield market having a difficult season because of the wet spring that killed a third of the sheep in Middlesex, is something you will discover when you go into the back. You go into the back. The larder is smaller than the main room. Stone walls, stone floor, the cold that comes from being half underground and facing north. It's the coldest room in the building, which in Tudor England is your refrigeration system. In winter, it works. In summer, it works less well, which is why everything in here right now smells the way it smells. There are shelves on 3 walls. On them, a round of hard cheese, yellow-brown with age and starting to crack. 3 dried fish, salt cod, imported from Iceland, tough as boot leather, a basket of dried peas, a crock of the sourdough starter, several bundles of dried herbs, sage, thyme, pennyroyal, some lavender, and a large bunch of what you're fairly sure is rue, though you've never asked what the rue is for. On the bottom shelf, wrapped in a cloth, the lamb. You unwrap it. The smell hits you like an open hand. You've been doing this for 2 years. You know what good meat smells like, and you know what bad meat smells like, and you know what meat that's in the interesting middle zone smells like. This is the interesting middle zone. It has the sweetness that comes just before the turn. The stage that a cook who'd rather not know calls well-aged, and a cook being honest with himself calls borderline. The colour is wrong too. Not dramatically wrong. Not the grey-green of actual bad meat, but slightly off, slightly more brown than pink, the kind of colour that, if it were in front of you on a table in your own home, you'd hesitate. You look at it for a moment, then you carry it to the main room, where Walter Crispy is stoking the fire. Master Crispy. The lamb. What about it? The smell is... Walter Crispy looks at you. His face does the thing it does when he's decided a conversation is being unnecessarily extended. He holds out his hand. You give him the cloth-wrapped package. He unwraps it, bends over, smells it. Straightens up. Pepper, he says, and some of the ginger. It'll be fine once it's cooked. He puts it back in your hands. Pepper and some of the ginger. This is the detail everyone leaves out about Tudor food. This is the thing that gets cut from the elegant cookbooks with their recipes for swan in a sauce of almond milk and their instructions for making subtleties of marchpane shaped like castles. The pepper, the ginger, the reason these spices cost what they cost and are used the way they're used, not for taste. Well, taste too, but mainly smell. Spices are a technology. They are the 16th century's solution to the problem of meat that cannot be kept cold in a city of 500,000 people, in a climate where July is still cold enough to make your breath steam in the morning, but hot enough by afternoon to begin the process of transformation in any unrefrigerated piece of animal protein. Pepper is antifungal. Ginger masks. Cinnamon covers the sweetness of early rot so completely that a pie made from meat that was 3 days past its best can smell, when it comes out of the oven, like nothing is wrong at all. The crust seals it in. The spice announces itself. The customer smells spice, not meat. This is what the history books call heavily spiced Tudor cuisine. This is why. You start on the batch. The work is physical in the way that a lot of work was physical in Tudor England, not skilled, or not purely skilled, but requiring you to be present in your body in a complete and unignorable way. There is no moment in the next 2 hours when you'll be able to think about something else, because the work will not permit it. The pastry first. Flour from the sack. A rough flour, not the fine white manchet flour that goes into bread for rich households, but the kind that comes out darker and denser and more honest about what it is. You measure it by eye. 2 years of this means your eye is accurate to within a fraction of an ounce. You've learned to trust it. Fat into the flour. And here's where the morning becomes real. Becomes something your hands understand better than your mind does. You're working with lard, rendered pig fat kept in a clay crock cold enough to be solid. You take a handful and work it into the ice, flour with your fingers, breaking it down, rubbing it between your palms until the flour begins to change texture, to go from dusty white and separate to something more cohesive. Something that clumps, something that is starting to become dough. Your fingers go cold immediately. The lead is cold enough to make them ache, and you work through it, pushing and pressing and rubbing, your hands disappearing into the grey-white mass of flour and fat. This will take 10 minutes. Your hands will not be warm again for another hour. Water. Cold water from the bucket you just carried. You pour it in slowly, just enough, working it through, turning the mass in the wooden trough until it comes together. Too much, and the pastry is soft and won't hold its shape. Too little, and it cracks when you try to fold it. You've made this mistake both ways, and you've made it enough times to know exactly where the line is. You cover it with the cloth. Set it aside. Now the meat. Now the pepper and the ginger. Walter Crispy keeps a set of scales on the shelf by the larder door. He checks them twice a week against the standard weights he keeps wrapped in a cloth. The city's official weights, issued by the guild, against which his scales must be accurate, or he risks a fine that would take a month to earn back. But the scales are for weighing what he sells. The pepper and ginger are measured differently. He has a wooden spoon with a particular notch carved into the handle, about a third of the way up. When you're using ginger, you fill the spoon to the notch. When you're using pepper, you fill it twice. This is the system. It is not written down anywhere. It exists only in the notch and in your memory. You add the ginger first. Ginger in 1557 has been imported from somewhere in East Asia, shipped via Alexandria or Constantinople, transited through the spice markets of Venice or Genoa, carried across the channel, taxed at the London Customs House, sold to a wholesaler in the Strand, sold on to a smaller trader, and eventually purchased by Walter Crisp for more money per ounce than you earn in a day. This is a luxury item. The economics of spice in Tudor England are so extreme that they will, over the next 2 centuries, fundamentally reshape the politics of the known world. The desire to control the spice trade is one of the driving forces behind European exploration of the Americas and Asia. And right now you're using it to make this meat not smell like what it smells like. You chop the lamb into small pieces. Your knife is good. A proper cook's knife, heavy and long, one of the few things in the cookshop that Walter Crispy spent real money on. The blade is slightly curved from years of being resharpened. It goes through the meat easily, though the meat resists slightly more than fresh meat would, slightly more than it should. You add the ginger, the spoon, the notch. You add the pepper from the second spoon. You add salt. Coarse, grey salt. Cheaper than the white salt that goes on the table in rich households, but the same chemical compound, the same function. Salt is the other ancient preservative technology. Salt pulls moisture out of things that want to rot. Salt has been keeping food alive long enough to eat since before recorded history. You mix it with your hands. Your fingers are cold, and the mixture is cold, and the smell of it, raw meat and spice and fat, fills the larder and fills your lungs and fills, in a way you can't quite name, the back of your mind. So that for the rest of the day, whatever else you're smelling, underneath everything, there is this. Agnes comes in at some point and adds something from a small jar. She doesn't explain what it is. You don't ask. It's dark-coloured and slightly oily, and the smell of it, when she opens the jar, is something between vinegar and burnt wood. You've seen her add it before. The pies taste of nothing you can identify except good. This is fine. This is how cooking works. Here, in this kitchen, in this year. Everyone knows parts of it. Nobody knows all of it. The pies are assembled on the long wooden table. You roll the pastry out flat. A wooden rolling pin worn smooth with use, the surface of the table worn smooth with longer use. The whole operation requiring a specific pressure and rhythm that you've internalized without being able to teach it. You cut circles with the tin cutter that hangs on the wall, each circle the same size, slightly larger than your hand. Fill, fold, crimp. The crimping is important. The crimp is what seals the pie, what keeps the filling in, what keeps the steam inside and building while the pie bakes, turning what is inside into something safe, or safer than what it started as. The heat will kill most of what needs killing. The oven runs hot enough. Tudor bakers know about the relationship between heat and safety without knowing the germ theory that explains it. They know it the same way their grandparents knew it, empirically, through the evidence of who got sick and who didn't, through the accumulated wisdom of centuries of feeding people in cities without cold chains. You crimp 30 pies before the first batch goes in. The oven is a domed stone structure built into the chimney wall. It was heated for 2 hours yesterday evening with a fire of oak wood which has now been raked out. The stone holds the heat. You test it by holding your hand at the opening. If you can count to 10 before the heat becomes unbearable, it's the right temperature. You can count to 7, close enough. The pies go in on the long wooden peel, a flat paddle, like a giant spatula, which you slide them onto and then push back into the oven's heat. You work quickly. The oven cools every time you open it. Speed matters. You close the iron door. 20 minutes. The smell that starts coming from the oven about 5 minutes in is one of the better smells in your daily life. Hot pastry browning. The fat in the filling rendering down, hissing slightly against the inside of the pastry shell. The spices warming and opening up, releasing. Ginger and pepper and the mystery ingredient from Agnes's jar, creating something that smells, legitimately, like food. Like good food. Like food you'd want to eat. By the time the pies come out 22 minutes later, golden brown, solid, their crimped edges slightly darker than the tops, smelling of everything that went in and nothing of what concerned you. By then, even you want one. You've eaten enough cookshop pies to know that wanting them and eating them are decisions you make separately on different grounds. But still, they smell good. The cart waits in the alley beside the cookshop. It's a simple thing. A wooden box on 2 large wheels with a crossbar at one end where you grip and push, and 2 smaller wheels at the front that turn. Painted once, long ago, in a green that has faded to something between grey and memory. On the side, in black letters that Walter Crispy painted himself with considerable effort. Crispus Pies, fresh daily. Below that, slightly smaller, slightly less confident. Also, puddings and pasties is available. The cart has a hinged lid that props up on a stick to create shade and a surface for displaying goods. Underneath the lid, the interior is lined with a thick layer of straw, insulation of a sort. Not cold insulation, warmth insulation. The pies come out of the oven hot, and the straw's job is to keep them that way as long as possible, because a hot pie sells and a cold pie does not sell, or at least sells badly. And by late morning, when the pies have been in the cart for 4 hours in July, the question of temperature becomes a daily negotiation between physics and commerce. You load the first batch, 30 pies. Then you go back for the second batch, which Agnes has assembled while you are doing the oven, her hands moving faster than yours and more certainly folding and crimping without looking, talking to herself in a low continuous murmur that might be prayer or might be complaint or might just be the habit of a woman who's been doing this alone for years. Third batch, which will go into the cart midday and which you'll have to carry from the shop, is still raw. It'll be ready by 9. You load what you have. The cart is heavy. You test it by pushing it a few inches. The cobblestones in the alley are uneven and wet with something you don't examine closely. The cart rocks and rattles and the pies shift in their straw bed. You push harder. The wooden wheels hit the lip of the alley, hit the street, hit the morning. The street pushes back. Cheapside at 5:30 in the morning has a specific texture that you have learned by body, by the muscles in your arms and the balls of your feet, and the specific ache that develops in your lower back by 7 o'clock and lives there until you sleep. The street is not flat. It presents itself as flat if you're walking it, unencumbered if you're just a body moving through space. But push a cart through it, and you discover its whole personality. The slight camber toward the centre, designed to direct water runoff, but which means you're fighting the slope from the moment you leave the alley. The raised areas around the old water channel which crosses Cheapside just before Friday Street. The section near the poultry market where someone has laid new cobbles, and they're not quite the same height as the old ones, and the joint between them is a reliable 2-inch lip that you hit every time at the wrong angle. Your hands grip the crossbar. The wood is cold. It's always cold at this hour. It's worn smooth in the middle, slightly rough at the edges where the grain has raised, and it fits your hands in the way that a thing you use every day fits your hands, as if it were made for you, though it was made for no one in particular. You push, the cart moves, the day begins. The cry is part of the job, and you have your own version of it, shaped over 2 years into something that is half Walter Crispy's phrasing and half what your own voice does naturally. Hot pies, fresh pies from Crispy's kitchen, pepper and ginger, lamb pies, fresh this morning, your voice carries. You've learned to throw it forward rather than upward, to project along the street rather than into the air above, so that it travels at face height where the people are. It's a skill nobody teaches you. You develop it by watching the other cartmen, by listening to how their voices cut through the street noise and how yours sometimes doesn't, by experimenting in the early mornings when the street is quiet enough that you can hear yourself clearly. The first customers are always the same type, not the early merchants. They've eaten at home or sent someone for better food. Not the apprentices who are still being set to work by their masters and won't have time to eat until the mid-morning break. Not the noble households who send their servants to the market for proper provisions, not to street carts. Your first customers are the working poor, the ones who are already at work at this hour, who have been at work since before you got up, who have nothing at home and no time to prepare it if they did. The ones for whom a halfpenny pie is not a luxury and not a sacrifice, but just the arithmetic of the morning. A labourer with hands the colour of the river mud he's been working in since 4, laying the new foundation stones for a merchant's warehouse near the guild hall. He holds out a coin, he takes the pie. He eats half of it in 3 bites standing in the street and pockets the rest for later. 2 women from the fish stalls at the east end of Cheapside, their aprons already carrying the evidence of their trade, smelling of the river in a way that makes your meat smell seem mild by comparison. They buy 2 pies between them, share a third, give you a halfpenny back change and exchange a look over your head that you've learned, in this city, not to take personally. Women who work fish stalls have a precise and finely calibrated contempt for the world that is entirely earned and directed at nothing personal. A boy about your age or slightly younger in the livery of a household you don't recognise, someone's servant, running an errand before the household wakes up. He stops, looks at the cart with the expression of someone calculating whether they're allowed to make this decision. Then he buys a pie, eats it walking fast and not looking back, guilty in the specific way of someone spending money that isn't theirs on something not on the list. This is the morning trade. Small, steady. 3 pence earned before the sun has properly cleared the rooftops. By 7, the street has changed completely. This is the thing about Cheapside. It's not one street. It's several streets happening in the same place at slightly different times of day. At 5, it's the working poor and the supply chain. At 7, it's the shopkeepers opening their shutters, the apprentices being unleashed on the day's first errands, the first of the day's proper commercial traffic beginning to build. The sound changes. At 5, there's a certain quiet in it. People going about their business without ceremony, without performance. At 7, the performance begins. The voices get louder. The stalls get dressed. The goods get displayed with care and intention. Cheapside's permanent shops line the street on both sides, their shutters swinging down and out to become counters, their wares spread out on the wooden shelves behind. Goldsmiths in the middle section, clustered together the way trades cluster in Tudor London, where the guild system creates neighbourhoods of shared occupation. Drapers to the west, haberdashers, mercers, jewellers. The Mercers' Company has its hall here, a building of considerable grandeur that sits among its neighbours with the quiet confidence of serious money. This is the commercial heart of London. Not the docks, not the exchange, not the law courts at Westminster. This street, this one street, Cheapside, running from St. Paul's in the west to the Poultry in the east, half a mile of commerce that processes more money per day than the treasury of some small countries. And you are pushing your cart through it, calling out that you have hot pies, which you do, though they are slightly less hot than they were 40 minutes ago. Hot pies, lamb and ginger, fresh this morning. The irony is not lost on you after 2 years. You're the lowest form of commercial life on this street. The grand shops behind their polished counters, with their bolts of silk and their silver plate, sell to the court and the nobility and the wealthy merchants. You sell to their servants, to the men laying their streets, to the people who make it possible for the street to exist at all, who are invisible in the street's own account of itself. But you are here on the same street every morning. There is something in that. The trouble starts, as trouble often does on Cheapside at the bread stall. You've pushed your cart past the baker's stall on the south side of the street, a permanent fixture operated by a man named Robert Ashe, who has been baking bread on this street since before you arrived in London. His loaves are his business, and his reputation, and, if the assize of bread is to be believed, also the city's business, because the assize of bread is one of the oldest pieces of consumer protection legislation in English history, a law that regulates the price and weight of bread sold in London with a specificity that is, for this era, almost modern. The law says a loaf of bread of a certain type must weigh a certain amount and must cost a certain price. The price is adjusted based on the current cost of grain. The weight is non-negotiable. If you sell underweight bread, you are fined. If you persist, you are dragged through the streets on a hurdle with the underweight loaf tied around your neck so that everyone can see what you've done. This is not a metaphor. This is a real thing that happens. You've seen it happen twice. The trouble this morning is that someone, a woman in a brown kirtle, she looks like a household cook buying for her employer's kitchen, has bought a loaf from Robert Ashe and carried it immediately to the conduit, where the ward's bread weigher is doing his morning inspections, and has placed it on the scales. The scales dip in the wrong direction. Not a lot, not dramatically, but enough. You stop your cart. You're pretending to adjust the cloth over the pies, but you're watching. The bread weigher is a small man with a large hat and the air of someone who's been given a modest amount of official authority and has organised his entire personality around it. He looks at the scales. He looks at the loaf. He looks at Robert Ashe, who has emerged from behind his counter with the particular expression of a man preparing his defence before the charges have been formally read. Short weight, the bread weigher says. It was perfectly weighed when I sold it. Short weight. The morning dampness. Robert Ashe. The bread weigher's voice goes formal in the way of someone who's practised this speech. By the assize of bread, this loaf falls short of the required. And here is where it gets complicated, because several other people have stopped now. Shopkeepers, passers-by, 2 men who've just bought bread from Robert Ashe this morning and who are now looking at their loaves with a new consideration. "Let me weigh mine," one of them says. "And mine," says the woman with the fish apron, who has appeared from nowhere with the rapid materialization of someone who has been waiting for exactly this kind of scene to develop. His bread's always been short, someone else says. I've said it before. Robert Ash's face has gone the colour of raw dough. Now look. You push your cart forward slightly, not away from the scene, but around it, threading between the people who are gathering with the smooth efficiency of long practice. A crowd forming around a controversy is simultaneously an opportunity and a danger for a pie cart. Opportunity because people standing in one place with nothing to do get hungry. Danger because crowds in Tudor London can shift from curious to agitated with a speed that's difficult to predict. You've seen what happens when they shift. Hot pies, you call, but quietly. Positioned at the edge of the gathering, not inside it. 3 things happen in the next 5 minutes. First, a 4th loaf, bought by a man in merchant's clothes who looks offended by the whole scene, is placed on the scales and found to be perfectly correct weight. This is more complicated for everyone than the simple version would have been. Second, the bread weigher writes something in his book, tears out a page with elaborate ceremony, hands it to Robert Ash with the words, "You'll appear before the ward court at Friday's sitting," and walks away with the particular gait of a man who has done his duty and is no longer required to remain in this situation. Third, and most significantly for you, a large woman in a grey apron pushes through the crowd from the direction of the nearest cross street and stops in front of your cart. "How much?" she says, pointing at the pies. "Halfpenny each, mistress. Fresh this morning. Lamb and ginger." "I'll have 4. You sell 4 pies. The crowd, having been denied the full spectacle it was hoping for, begins to disperse. Robert Ash retreats behind his counter. The woman in the brown kirtle takes her scales-verified short loaf and walks away with the satisfaction of someone who has done a civic good before 9 in the morning. 2d in your leather pouch. The morning continues. You know the geography of your route the way you know your own body. Not by naming it, but by feel. Left at the end of Cheapside, down toward the Guildhall. The cobbles change character here. Wider stones, better laid. The deliberate paving of a street that sees important foot traffic. The Guildhall is the administrative centre of the city, the place where the mayor and aldermen conduct the business of London, and the streets around it have been maintained with more care than the average. You feel it through the wheels. There's a cluster of workshops here tucked into the lanes that run off the main street. Smiths, coopers, a chandler whose shop always smells like a candle has been burning since the creation of the world. Men coming out of those workshops at this hour are men who started at 4 in the morning and who are genuinely hungry, for whom the pie is not a snack but a meal, and who will pay without negotiation and eat fast and not complain. These are your best customers, not the highest paying. The merchants' households pay more if you can get their trade, but the most reliable. A good round past the workshops by the Guildhall earns you 6d on a good morning, 8d if there's a fair day or the Smiths are working a long contract. Today is a Wednesday, no fair, and the summer work is steady. You sell 6 pies at the first pass. You stop at the pump on Wood Street to drink. This is important and easy to forget. The work of pushing the cart through the streets, the uneven cobbles, the slight uphill sections, the need to stop and start to navigate around the constant chaos of people and animals and other carts. This is real physical work. By mid-morning you sweat through your shirt in the summer. Your mouth goes dry. The consequences of not drinking enough water are ones you have experienced personally and do not intend to repeat. The pump water tastes of iron and something else, something mineral and slightly sulphurous. You've come to associate the taste with this particular pump and with this particular point in your morning, and so it has become, if not good, at least right. The right taste at the right moment. You drink 2 handfuls, wipe your mouth on your sleeve, push on. There is a man on Milk Street who watches you every morning. He sits on a stool outside the door of a workshop, a shoemaker's you think, though you've never looked directly at the sign, and he eats a piece of bread and a piece of cheese very slowly, and he watches the street. He's old, white-haired. He has the stillness of someone who has decided that the day's main activity is observation and who takes this seriously. The first few times you passed him, you said hot pies in his direction as a matter of professional habit. He shook his head each time. Eventually you stopped offering and he started nodding. This is the closest thing to a relationship you have on this street with someone who isn't a customer or a competitor. Today he's holding a piece of bread in one hand and he's staring at the middle distance with an expression you cannot read. As you pass, he looks at you. Boy, he says. You stop. He's never spoken to you before. Master, what's in the pies today? You open your mouth, close it. In this single pause you make a calculation. The calculation is, what is this man and what answer does he want and what answer is true? The answers to those questions are not necessarily the same. Lamb, you say. Ginger, pepper, good pastry. He looks at you for a long moment. His eyes are pale blue and very clear, which surprises you. You expected something cloudier from someone so old. Lamb, he says. Yes. This week. Yes. He breaks off a piece of his bread and chews it. Looks back at the middle distance. Last week, he says. The pies from the cart on Old Jewry. I asked what was in them. He pauses. The man told me pork. Another pause. It was not pork. You wait. Not entirely pork, he says. The texture was different. Pork's there's a grain to it. A good piece of pork, you can feel the grain even through a crust. This had no grain. He looks at you again. What has no grain? You know. Any cook knows. Any experienced eater in Tudor London knows, or suspects, or has chosen not to know. I couldn't say, master, you say. He nods, as if this is the answer he expected. I'm buying your pies, he says. 2, from now on. He holds out a penny. You give him 2 pies. He takes them without looking at them, takes a bite of the first one, chews carefully, nods once. You push the cart on. Let me tell you what he was talking about, because this is the thing, the specific thing, that the history books do not like to dwell on. Tudor London has no formal meat inspection system. The guilds control quality in theory. The butcher's company is supposed to ensure that what gets sold as beef is beef, and what gets sold as pork is pork. The city's market inspectors, the clerks of the market, are supposed to prevent the sale of putrid or adulterated food. In practice, this is difficult. The city is enormous, the inspectors are few. The penalties are real, but rarely severe enough to outweigh the economics of the alternative. And the alternative is simple. If you have something that is nominally meat, but is not exactly what you'd call prime cuts, there are always cookshops that will buy it, spice it, encase it in pastry, and sell it on the street to people who are hungry and who have halfpenny and who are not, in that moment, in a position to interrogate provenance. Horsemeat is the obvious one. Everyone knows about horsemeat. The old knackers' yards outside the city gates are where horses go when they can no longer work, and the meat that comes out of them goes somewhere, and some of that somewhere is into pies. This is not a secret. People know. They choose not to ask. More difficult are the other possibilities. Dog is real, cat is rare but not impossible. And then there are the things that get blended in not because they are fundamentally different from what the customer expects, but because they pad out the filling. Offal of various kinds, lungs and stomachs and intestinal walls, chopped fine, mixed in, seasoned heavily, and baked until the temperature has eliminated any remaining obligation to discuss origins. This is not unique to London. This is not unique to Tudor England. This is how street food in cities without cold chains or regulatory infrastructure has worked for all of human history. The difference between the fancy cookbook and the street cart is the difference between the ideal and the available, between what the city imagines itself to be and what it actually does to survive. Walter Crisp's pies are not the worst you can buy in London, not even close. They are what they are. You know what they are. You sell them every day to people who are glad to have them. This is the contract, unspoken, universal, the contract of the street. By 9 o'clock the sun has cleared the rooftops and the day has become itself. Cheapside in full summer morning is something that defies easy description, not because it is difficult to see, but because there is too much of it in every direction at once. The eye doesn't know what to focus on, so you learn to stop trying to see all of it, and instead you learn to move through it, which is a different skill. The noise is the first thing that hits you always, even after 2 years. Not just voices, though there are thousands of those. Not just the street vendors calling their wares, though there are dozens of them within earshot, each with their own rhythm and their own cry. It's the undersound, the constant. It's the sound of a city operating, the sound of iron on stone and wood on wood, and the creak of hinges and the slap of rope against wood, and the conversation of horses and the random percussion of commerce and industry that has been going on since before dawn and will not stop until well after dark. The cart vendors are your competition and your community. You know most of them by face, some by name. There's William, who sells hot wine from a wide-mouthed jug kept over a brazier that he wheels on a flat cart. The brazier makes him easy to spot and easy to smell from a distance. On cold mornings he does extraordinary business. On summer mornings less so, but summer mornings he switches to a different pitch, which involves explaining at length about the medicinal properties of spiced wine for digestive health. It works better than it should. There's the woman with the apples. She's not technically a cart vendor, she carries her apples in a large basket on her arm, but she follows the same logic, the same streets, the same rhythm. Her name is Marjorie, and she has 3 children, and she knows every customer by first name and some detail of their personal lives that she deploys at the precise moment most likely to produce a sale. Fresh this morning, Master of Ellipse. Your wife was looking well at church last Sunday. Has her headache resolved? I've got a good English apple here, crisp and sweet, just the thing. She sells more apples than you sell pies. You've studied her technique. You've tried to apply it. You don't have her memory for names or her ability to make a customer feel like they are the specific person she's been waiting for all morning. This is a gift, and you don't have it. What you have is consistency, reliability, the ability to be in the same place at roughly the same time every day, so that the people who want pies know where to find them. This is its own value. And the pies are actually, and you feel the old man's eyes on you as you think this, the pies are actually pretty good. The second run of pies comes out of the oven at 9, and Agnes sends her daughter with them wrapped in a cloth to meet you at the junction of Cheapside and Friday Street. Alice Crispy is 12 years old and looks at you with the precise mixture of contempt and assessment that 12-year-olds direct at anyone who has not yet proven themselves to be interesting. She holds out the cloth. Mother says the third batch didn't go in yet. Why not? She didn't say. This means something. If the third batch hasn't gone in, the mid-morning rush, when apprentices get their break, when the midday crowd starts building, will find you with less to sell than you need, half the cart instead of full, less income, a small account for the day's ledger. You say nothing about this to Alice. It's not her problem. You take the cloth, feel the pies through the fabric, good and hot, solid, their crimped edges still holding, and load them into the cart beneath the others. The older pies have cooled somewhat in the straw but are still warm. The new ones will reheat them slightly through proximity. Tell your mother thank you, you say. Alice shrugs and leaves, already thinking about something else. You push on. By 10 o'clock you are further from the cookshop than your morning route usually takes you. This is a decision you make some mornings when the pies are selling well and you've cleared enough of the regular stock to justify pushing further east into the wards where your usual competition is lighter and the morning workers are still in their stride. Bishopsgate Ward, Leadenhall area. The Great Market of Leadenhall is one of the oldest in London. A covered market, more or less, or at least a market with a permanent structure around it, where poultry and dairy and other provisions has been sold for 100 years. The area around it smells accordingly. You're past the point where smells bother you in any simple way. Your nose has, over 2 years, developed its own hierarchy of smells, its own system of significance. The smell of the Leadenhall market is in the category of intense, but neutral. It is the smell of food in the state before it becomes food, chickens and geese complaining in their coops, the slightly chalky smell of freshly cracked eggs, the faint copper and iron smell of the poultry blood that always finds its way to the cobblestones regardless of how carefully the sellers work. It is not a pleasant smell. It is, in some sense, the honest smell of where food comes from, the smell that is carefully eliminated from the final product, and which the final product hopes you will not associate with it. You push your cart into the market area and call your pies. Hot pies, fresh this morning, lamb and ginger, pepper pies, hot. A woman looking at chickens turns around. The woman looking at chickens turns around, and her face does the calculation that every customer's face does, that small rapid arithmetic of want versus cost versus time. She's a cook. You can tell by the apron, which is large and serious, and by the way she looks at the pies, not with curiosity but with professional assessment. Her eyes go to the crust. She's checking the colour. She's checking whether the edges have held. She's checking. And this is the thing that experienced cooks check that ordinary hungry people don't. Whether the bottom of the pie is darkened properly, which tells you whether it was cooked through or whether it was rushed. She holds out her hand. You give her one. She turns it over, looks at the bottom, presses it slightly with one thumb, sniffs. You wait. Who bakes for you? She says. Walter Crispy, cookshop on Cheapside near the conduit. Crispy. She repeats the name like she's filing it. These are his pies? His recipe. I bake the morning batch. She looks at you for a moment. Then she looks at the pie again. I'll take 6, she says. 6 pies to a cook buying for a household is not the same as 6 pies to 6 individual customers. It's faster, it's cleaner, and it means someone of judgment has assessed your products and found it acceptable, which is the best advertisement available in a world without printing presses that care about cookshops. You take her money, 3p she haggles you down from 3p halfpenny. with the absolute calm of a woman who's been buying provisions for 20 years and knows exactly what things are worth. And you watch her walk away with the pies wrapped in her apron, already moving on to the next item on her mental list. The remaining pies in the cart are down to 11. This is good. This is almost a good morning. The trouble arrives, as most trouble in the trade arrives, from a direction you're not looking. You've turned the cart around, heading back west toward the main street, when you hear your name. Not your real name. Nobody out here calls you Thomas. Your trade name, if you can call it that, which is just the name of your employer's product, Crispy's Boy. You stop, turn around. There are two men. You know them both, in the way you know anyone who operates in the same streets long enough. The first is Roger Holt, who is a full member of the Cook's Company, the guild that nominally governs the trade of cooked food sold in the city. He's a thick-set man in his 40s with a reddish face and hands that he holds slightly away from his body, the habitual posture of a man who's used to feeling hot things and is always prepared for the possibility. The second you know only as the man who walks with Roger Holt on inspection days. He carries a book and a writing implement, and he has the air of someone for whom the book and writing implement are an identity and not merely tools. Roger Holt is looking at your cart. "Morning," you say. "Morning," he says without warmth. "How many?" 33 sold this morning, 11 remaining. "What filling?" "Lamb, ginger and pepper." "Let me see." This is not a question. You open the cart lid and prop it with the stick. He looks at the remaining pies, picks one up, turns it over, exactly as the cook did, but his examination is different in character. He's not assessing quality for personal use. He is looking for something specific. "Lamb," he says. "Yes." "Crispy gets his meat from where?" "I don't know the supplier's name," you say. This is partially true. You know where the meat comes from in the general sense, from a butcher in the Shambles area, west of St. Paul's, one of dozens of such operations. But you don't know the specific name because Walter Crispy has never told you. This may be deliberate on Walter Crispy's part. Roger Holt looks at you. He has the eyes of someone who has heard partial truths before and has developed a professional relationship with the space between partial truth and useful information. The guild has had complaints, he says, about the Cheapside carts, multiple operators, mixed filling, unlabelled substitution. The man with the book writes something. "Lamb pies sold as lamb," Roger Holt says, where the lamb is not entirely lamb. You say nothing. You understand what I'm saying? "Yes," you say. "Your master understands the Cook's Company ordinances regarding mislabelled provisions?" "I believe so." "You believe so?" He picks up another pie, looks at it, puts it back. The fine for first offence is 12 shillings. Second offence is exclusion from trading. Third offence is the hurdle and the collar. He looks at you. "I'm not saying your pies have anything wrong with them. I'm saying there have been complaints from this area of the street, from this general hour of the morning." He closes the cart lid for you, with the deliberate care of someone demonstrating that they could have done otherwise. "Tell Crispy," he says, "that the guild is watching the Cheapside carts this month." He and the man with the book walk away. You stand with your hands on the crossbar of the cart for a moment. 12 shillings. Walter Crisp earns, on a very good week, perhaps 8 shillings from the cart trade. 12 shillings is a ruinous fine. 12 shillings is the kind of fine that does not just hurt, but actually changes things. What you can buy for the larder, what Agnes can afford for the next batch, whether you get the new pair of shoes you've been calculating towards since spring. You push the cart back toward Cheapside. Hot pies, you say, but your voice is smaller than it was an hour ago. And a man passing in the opposite direction shakes his head without looking at you, and the street continues its business as if none of this has happened. Because for the street, none of it has. There is something you should understand about the guild system, because it matters to everything that happens in this story, and it is the kind of thing that is easy to explain badly. The Cook's Company is not, primarily, about food safety. That's the stated purpose. That's the language it uses when it presents itself to the civic authorities, when it petitions the mayor, when it writes its ordinances. The actual purpose, the mechanical function of the guild, the thing that explains why Roger Holt and his bookkeeper are walking the streets of the Leadenhall area on a Wednesday morning, is market control. The guild system in Tudor England is a cartel, a legal cartel, an official cartel, a cartel with royal charters and civic privileges, but a cartel in the economic sense, a group of established producers who have organised to limit competition and maintain prices. If you want to sell cooked food commercially in the City of London, you need to be a member of, or be working for a member of the relevant guild. If you operate outside the guild, you're operating outside the law. Walter Crisp is a member. His membership is one of the real things he owns, one of the real costs of his business, a recurring expense that he grumbles about every quarter when the fee comes due, and which he has nonetheless paid without fail for 20 years, because without it he has no cart and no street and no business. The guild sets prices, not precisely, the market does some of that, but they establish floors. They establish what a pie costs and what a pie must contain to be called what it is called. These rules protect consumers from the worst adulteration. They also, conveniently, protect established members from competition that might undercut them by selling cheaper product. Both things are true at once. Roger Holt's interest in the Cheapside carts this month is probably real. There probably have been complaints. There are always complaints in a city where the gap between what food is supposed to contain and what it actually contains is large and variable and known to everyone, at least in outline. But Roger Holt's interest is also the interest of a man who's checking that the market he belongs to is behaving in the way the guild requires, that Walter Crisp's pies are, within whatever definitions are currently operative, properly labelled, that no one on Cheapside is selling pies at a price so low that it undercuts the guild's members, which would be possible only if the pies contained something that cost significantly less than what they were supposed to contain. The inspection is real. The fine is real. The question of what is actually in the pies is, somehow, both the point and beside the point. You think about this as you push the cart back toward Cheapside. You reach the cookshop at 10:30. The third batch is in the oven. Agnes is not in the main room. You hear her upstairs, her voice, and then Walter Crisp's voice, low and rapid, the tone of a conversation that is about something specific and not going entirely smoothly. You wait in the main room. The fire has been built back up from the morning's embers, and the room is warm now, properly warm, the kind of warmth that the kitchen generates by 10 o'clock on a summer day and which will by midday become something closer to oppression. The smell in here by this hour is different from the morning. The raw smells have cooked off. What's left is the smell of cooking, the warmth of the oven, the crust browning, the fat of the filling going slowly liquid and beginning to seep into the pastry from the inside, creating that particular texture where the inner surface of the crust is soft and yielding, and the outer surface is hard and coloured and slightly caramelized from the heat. This smell is, Objectively good. You sit on the stool by the fire. Your feet hurt. Your lower back has the dull ache that develops around the 2-hour mark of pushing the cart. The ache that doesn't go away until you're horizontal at night. Your hands smell of the cart handle and of the lard from the morning's pastry and of the leather of the money pouch and of the street. You pull the pouch out and count what's in it. 10 pence. A good morning. Walter Crispay comes downstairs while you're still counting. He's dressed in his outdoor coat, which means he's going somewhere. He looks at you and then at the money pouch and then back at you. How many out? 33 sold. 11 came back. Third batch in the oven. Another 15 minutes. He pulls on his gloves. Holt was on the street this morning. It's not a question. Yes, you say. Spoke to you? Said the guild is watching the Cheapside carts. Said there have been complaints. Walter Crispy makes a sound that is not quite a word. He straightens his coat, looks at the oven door for a moment as if it has offended him. What else? He asked where we get the meat. I said I didn't know the supplier. Walter Crisp looks at you again. The look lasts slightly longer than the previous ones. Good, he says. He goes to the door. The batch will be ready soon, he says. Alice'll help you load. Take the east route today. Stay off the Leadenhall circuit. He leaves. You sit with the 10 pence in your palm and think about what he didn't say, which is more informative than what he did. Alice is waiting when the pies come out. She's a more competent assistant than you give her credit for. She wraps pies in the cloth with quick, practiced movements. She doesn't complain about the heat of them, and she counts out exactly 15 with the precision of a child who's been doing this since she was old enough to count. Father went to the shambles, she says, without looking up. You file this away. Thank you, Alice. You're welcome, Thomas. She says your name with the particular inflection of someone who is choosing to be polite rather than having it come naturally. You load the cart. 50 new pies, hot through the cloth, going into the straw on top of the cooled ones. The temperature differential will even out eventually, leaving you with a cart of medium warm pies by early afternoon, which is acceptable. You push back out into the street. The east route. The east route takes you away from Cheapside's commercial centre and toward the denser, more crowded residential wards where the street trade is different in character. Not worse, necessarily, but different. The customers are less likely to be people on their way somewhere and more likely to be people who live here, who know the street sellers, who have their preferences and their loyalties and their opinions about your pies. Specifically, there is a woman on Cornhill. Her name is Joan. She sells second-hand linen from a blanket she spreads on the ground by the church, who buys a pie from you every day that you come past on the east route, and who has strong opinions about the pastry that she shares without being asked. Bottom soggy, she says today. You look at the bottom of the pie she's holding, which she's broken open to illustrate her point. The bottom crust is in fact slightly pale, underbaked, from the part of the oven where the heat is slightly lower. You know this. It's a consistent weakness of the third batch, which goes in after the oven has been opened twice and has lost some of its stored heat. I know, you say. I'm sorry, Joan. My sister bakes better pastry than this, and my sister has one hand. I'm sorry, Joan. I'm not complaining, she says, continuing to eat it. I'm just saying. This is Tudor London's approach to consumer feedback. Direct, personal, entirely without malice, delivered in the same tone as weather commentary. You've learned to receive it with the same equanimity. Tell your master, she says, that if he'd put the bottom on a hot stone first before the filling goes in, the bottom will bake faster and it won't go soft. I will. My grandmother told me that. She was the best baker in her village. I'll tell him. She tears off another piece and chews it. She has already, in some unspoken way, decided that the pie was worth the halfpenny and that the critique was separate from the purchase. This is also Tudor London's relationship with imperfect goods. Acknowledge the imperfection, consume the product, continue existing. By noon, the cart is half empty and your back is fully alive with the ache. Noon on a summer day in London is when the city reaches its peak intensity. The morning workers are taking breaks. The apprentices are loose. The shopkeepers' assistants are running errands. The law courts at Westminster have broken for a midday session. The professional men, lawyers, clerks, the various species of functionary that the city requires to operate, are out on the streets heading toward cookshops and taverns and the various establishments that feed the midday hunger. You are, briefly, everyone's first choice. The pies are still warm enough to claim warmth. The filling is set firm from cooling and has the texture that people associate with proper food rather than slop. The pastry has reached the exact state, slightly softened but still cohesive, where it eats best. You sell 8 pies in 20 minutes without trying especially hard. A lawyer's clerk who looks like he's been awake for 3 days straight. 2 journeymen roofers taking their midday break on a stone mounting block, their legs dangling, eating with the mechanical focus of men who have burned everything they started the day with. A woman who buys 4 and puts them directly into a basket without looking at them, provisioning for a household, a family somewhere. These 4 pies are someone's midday meal. 4 people who will never know your name or Walter Crispy's name, or anything about the morning that produced what they're about to eat. This is the invisibility of it. You feed people, and they don't know you. The food appears and is consumed, and the people who produced it are nowhere in the account. The great cookbooks of the era, the elaborate records of royal feasts, the accounts of what was served at the coronation banquet. They name the stewards and the great cooks and the lords who presided. They do not name the boys who push the carts. You think about this sometimes, not with bitterness, just as a fact of the geometry of this world, which has its centre somewhere you cannot see from here, and you are at its edge. The afternoon has a different quality from the morning. The morning has urgency. The urgency of the oven's heat, of the first customers, of the route being covered before the competition. The afternoon is heavier. The energy is still there, but it costs more to access it. Your legs have used up something that was replenished by sleep and the action of the morning, and now the body runs on a different register. More deliberate, each step requiring slightly more decision. The cart too is easier now, lighter by 2/3, but the lightness reveals the cart's own character rather than masking it. Empty or nearly empty, it rattles differently over the cobblestones. The wheels find every imperfection in the surface and report it up through the crossbar into your palms, which are red and slightly raw by this point. The skin beginning to toughen in the places where it presses most. You stop at the pump on Walbrook to drink and to rest your arms. The pump is in a small court off the main street, a stone basin with an iron pump handle, the water running clear and cold even in summer because it comes from somewhere deep enough to be insulated from the surface heat. 3 women are filling buckets. A child is sitting on the basin's edge, trailing her feet in the overflow. You drink. The cold of the water going down your throat is one of the genuinely good things about the afternoon, a physical fact that cuts through the fatigue and the accumulated sensory weight of the day's work. cold water, simple, unimprovable. You rest your arms on the basined stone rim and look at the court. The buildings here are old, crowded together, their upper floors projecting outward over the street in the way that Tudor construction encourages. Each floor slightly wider than the one below, capturing space at the expense of light, so that by the third story the gap between the buildings opposite is narrow enough that you could almost reach across and touch the window of the house facing you. Almost. The light that makes it down to street level is filtered and oblique, even at midday. It smells of the shadow here, different from the open street. Less sun-hot, more enclosed. The smell of old stone and the particular dampness of walls that never fully dry. A cat appears from somewhere and sits by the pump with the focused attention of an animal that has its own agenda and is not concerned with yours. You watch it. The cat watches the child's feet. The child watches the water. None of you says anything for a moment. St. Paul's Cathedral announces itself before you see it. Walking west along Cheapside in the early afternoon, you can chart your approach to it by the way the street begins to widen psychologically. Not physically, the street is the same width, but something about the open space ahead creates a different quality of air. More light from further away, the sound carrying differently. Then the south transept comes into view, and then the whole vast body of it, the longest cathedral in England at this moment in history, its nave stretching from east to west for 585 feet. You know this because you asked someone once and the number stuck. Its central tower rising to a height that makes it visible from far out on the river, from the Surrey Hills to the south, from the high ground north of the city. The spire, the famous wooden spire covered in lead, the one that was struck by lightning 30 years ago and burned and was never properly repaired, is still up there, diminished from what it was, carrying the marks of its damage like an old scar. It tops out at 450 feet, and it has the look of something that has survived something terrible and intends to go on surviving regardless of what happens next. You have been past St. Paul's hundreds of times. You have not stopped to look at it properly since your first week in the city, when you were new enough that everything was a wonder and you'd not yet learned to move through the city without stopping to notice it. Today, for no reason you can name, you stop. The cathedral's south churchyard is busy in the way it always is. St. Paul's churchyard is not just the churchyard of a cathedral, it's London's publishing district. The booksellers' stalls cluster around the building's base, their tables spread with printed books and pamphlets and broadsides and the various printed materials that the city's expanding literacy creates a market for. Men stand at the stalls reading without buying. Men stand in groups discussing. The churchyard hums with a kind of intellectual commerce that is different from the commodity commerce of Cheapside, though the two are only a few hundred yards apart. There are law students here. You can identify them by the combination of ink-stained fingers, reasonably good clothes, and the permanent expression of people who are simultaneously convinced of their own significance and uncertain about their own prospects. There are men selling everything from almanacs to ballads to what appear to be medical treatises of varying credibility. There is a man standing on a mounting block, reading aloud from a pamphlet to a small crowd. You cannot hear the words clearly from where you are, only the rhythm of it, the particular cadence of someone reading text written for speech rather than for silence. And there, against the cathedral wall, eating something out of a cloth, the old man from Milk Street. He has moved, apparently, from his usual station. Or perhaps he comes here sometimes. He looks up and sees you and your cart, and he does not look surprised. You push the cart over. You're away from your corner, you say. I come here Wednesdays, he says. The booksellers. He's eating what looks like bread and hard cheese. The same meal as always. He looks at your nearly empty cart. Good morning, he says. Decent. Holt found you. It's not a question. How did you know about that, you say? The old man looks at the cathedral. He chooses bread. He has the patience of someone who has decided that answering questions quickly is the most overrated habit in the world. I was in the cook's company, he says finally. 40 years. I know how Holt works. He says it without any particular emotion. Was, you say. Was, he agrees. I'm old enough that I can say was about most things. The guild, my wife, my hands doing the work they used to do. He holds up the hand not holding the bread. It shakes slightly, not dramatically, but visibly. The tremor of age. Your hands work, he says. Use them while they do. He goes back to his bread. You lean against the cart. Can I ask you something, you say? You already are. The pies? The ones you said weren't pork. The old man is quiet. What do you think was in them, you say? He chews for a long time. In 40 years in the cook's company, he says, I ate everything that goes into everything. I ate things I'd rather not think about in the early years, when I was poor enough that asking questions was a luxury I couldn't afford. He pauses. Horse is the obvious one. It's good meat, actually. A young horse, properly butchered, properly prepared. It's not as far from beef as people pretend it is. The texture is slightly different. The grain I told you about. He breaks off a corner of cheese. Dog you can taste once you know what you're tasting. There's a sweetness to it. Not unpleasant, but distinctive. He seems entirely calm about this. Cat is different. Very different texture. Cat's muscle is built for a different kind of movement, and you can feel it. He eats the cheese. The thing about the pie from Old Jewry, he says, was not that it contained something it shouldn't. It was that it was padded, bulked out. Lung, probably. Lung cuts fine and holds together well and costs almost nothing because nobody wants to pay for lung. But it changes the character of the filling if there's too much of it. Lung has a certain porousness to it, a looseness. He looks at you. Your pies don't have that. They have. The filling is... I know what's in your pies, he says. I've been eating them for 3 months. They're not what they're sold as entirely, but they're honest pies. Crispy knows where the line is. He wraps his remaining bread and cheese in the cloth. There's a line, he says. Every cook knows it. On one side you're doing what everyone does, using what's available, making the economics work, putting good flavour in, and not mentioning everything that went to produce it. On the other side, you're poisoning people, actively. He stands up slowly, his joints clearly voicing an opinion about the process. Most cooks in this city stay on the right side of that line, not all. Holt's job is finding the ones who don't. He looks at the cathedral for a moment. The thing is, he says, people in this city are hungry. Not famine hungry, most of them. Hungry in the ordinary way of people who work hard and can only afford to spend a halfpenny on their midday meal. Those people deserve to eat. Whatever goes into the pie that makes it possible for the pie to cost a halfpenny, that's not a crime. That's arithmetic. He starts walking away. Good afternoon, Thomas White, he says, not looking back. Tell Crispy to stick to the east route for a while. He disappears into the crowd around the booksellers' stalls. You stand with your nearly empty cart outside the longest cathedral in England, and you think about the line, about which side of it you're on, about which side Walter Crispy is on. You think about the woman in the brown kirtle, checking the bread weight this morning, about the scales dipping, about Robert Ash's face. You think about the 12 shillings. You think about Alice's hands folding pie after pie before dawn. You push the cart back toward Cheapside. The afternoon empties out. This is the other rhythm, the one that balances the morning. The morning builds, customers multiply, noise increases, the street reaches its peak intensity. And then, slowly, imperceptibly, like a tide turning, it reverses. The midday rush passes. The apprentices go back to their shops. The clerks return to their offices. The street thins. The remaining pies in the cart are 3. 3 pies, mid-afternoon, is not ideal. 3 pies means you either sell them before you get back or you carry them back to the cookshop, where they'll go into tomorrow's pot, which technically happens but which represents a small failure of calculation on someone's part. You try the usual technique. Stand still for a moment in a busy part of the street. Let the stationary cart attract attention. Call twice. See what comes. What comes is a child. He's maybe 8 or 9, ragged in the way of children, who are not anyone's first priority, thin in the way that is not quite alarming but is definitely being noticed. He stands about 6 feet from the cart and looks at it with an expression that is trying very hard to be neutral. "Hot pies," you say, not loudly, just to him. He says nothing. You look at him. He looks at the pies. "How much?" he says. "Halfpenny each." He opens his hand. There are coins in it. He looks at them with the absolute focus of someone counting something that matters enormously. 1 farthing. 2 farthings. Something that might be a halfpenny badly worn. He looks up at you. You look at the 3 pies. You think about Walter Crispy, about the 12 shillings, about the ledger that Agnes keeps in the back of the shop, and the weekly accounting that happens on Friday evenings, which you are present for, and which is conducted with a seriousness that reflects what the numbers mean. You think about the line. 2 farthings, you say. He gives you 2 farthings, which is half what the pie costs, which is half what Walter Crispy built the morning's calculations on. He takes the pie in both hands and bites into it immediately, standing right there in the street, and the filling is... You watch his face. The filling is what it should be. Hot, spiced, the pastry holding. He eats it in 4 bites. You look at the 2 remaining pies. "Go on," you say. He looks at the other hand, the one with the remaining coins. "Keep it," you say. He takes the second pie carefully, quickly, with the speed of someone who has learned that good things are time-limited. Then he is gone, around a corner, already somewhere else. You push the cart home with 1 pie. The 2pence you are short of today's tally is, you decide, a different kind of arithmetic. The cookshop in the late afternoon has a different character from the morning cookshop. The morning is production. The afternoon is accounting and recovery. Agnes is scrubbing the main table, the sound of her brush on wood a steady rhythm underneath everything else. The fire is lower, the oven cooling, the air clearing slightly as the day's heat production winds down. Walter Crisp is at the table with the ledger when you come in. He looks at the money pouch. He looks at the 1 remaining pie. He looks at your face. "Good day," he says. "Decent. Ran short at the end." You put the money on the table. He counts it without comment, makes a mark in the ledger. His pen moves with the economical certainty of someone who has been doing this specific thing for a long time and no longer requires thought to do it. "Halt," he says. "I told him I didn't know the supplier." "Good." He makes another mark. He'll come back. He always comes back. We'll be in order when he does. He closes the ledger. You don't ask what in order means. You know what it means in the general sense. The pies will be what they need to be, or will appear to be what they need to be, at the moment of inspection. This is different from being what they need to be always, which is a more expensive proposition. The old man on Milk Street, you say. Walter Crisp's pen pauses. He said to stick to the east route for a while. Walter Crisp looks at you. Then he goes back to the ledger. Smart man, he says. This is all you learn about their acquaintance. The late afternoon, chores are different from the morning ones. Quieter, more repetitive, the kind of work that the body does while the mind wanders. You wash the cart. This matters and is often skipped by other operators, which you know because you've walked past their carts parked in alleys and you've seen the state they get into. The inside of a pie cart that isn't cleaned properly becomes a problem fairly quickly. Old grease, crumbs of pastry, traces of filling that haven't been removed. In summer, this becomes visible and olfactory evidence that creates its own story for potential customers. You fill a bucket from the pump, cold water, a piece of rough cloth. You wipe out the interior of the cart, getting into the corners, getting the straw changed, getting the wooden surfaces as clean as they're going to get, which is not very clean in the absolute sense, but clean in the relative sense of the trade. The wheels. You oil the axles with a small cup of tallow. Neglect this and the wheels begin to announce themselves, and a cart that squeals at every turn is a cart that announces its operator before he can announce himself, and the announcement is wrong. The crossbar. You wipe it clean. Your hand marks are visible in the old wood. You've been adding your own layer to the accumulated layer of everyone who has used this crossbar before you, adding your own oils and your own wear. The wood is smooth where hands always touch it, rough at the edges. It will be smooth there eventually too, given enough hands, enough days. This is the invisible archaeology of use, the way things hold the record of what was done with them, in the surface and grain of them, in ways that don't require language or records. You oil it anyway with the tallow cloth, and the wood darkens slightly, and smells briefly like the larder. There is a man on the street outside the cookshop when you've finished with a cart. He's standing across the way, not doing anything in particular, which in a busy street is its own kind of activity. He's well dressed, not richly, but well, in the way that marks a certain level of prosperity without declaring it loudly. Wool coat, clean stockings, hat at an angle that might be accidental or might not. He looks occasionally at the cookshop sign. You watch him from the alley. After a few minutes he comes across. He's younger than you initially thought, maybe 25. He has a quick way of looking at things, and he looks at the cookshop front with an assessment that is trying not to look like assessment. Crispies, he says. Yes. Pies. Still. We're past the afternoon trade, you say. Morning tomorrow. He looks at the sign. The paint is faded. Crispies pies. Fresh daily. I used to buy pies here, he says. 3 years ago, when I was an apprentice on Threadneedle Street. He says it conversationally, without nostalgia, just locating himself in time. They're still good, you say. Are they? Not a question. He looks at the sign for another moment. Then he looks at you. You bake them? Morning batch? By yourself. Agnes, Mistress Crisp, does some of it. I do the pastry in the oven mostly. He nods. He has the air of someone who is interested but not sure why they are interested, following a curiosity that presented itself. What's in them? he says. The second time today someone has asked you this question directly. Lamb, you say. Ginger and pepper, good pastry. He looks at you steadily. What's really in them, he says. There is a version of this conversation where you give him the same answer you gave Roger Holt. There is a version where you tell him what you know. There is a version where you ask him why he wants to know. What difference would it make, you say? He thinks about this seriously, which you did not expect. None, probably, he says. I'd still buy them tomorrow if I wanted one. I was hungry enough 3 years ago that I didn't ask. I don't know why I'm asking now. He looks at the street. A cart of cabbages passes between you briefly. My master used to say, he says, that London runs on not asking questions, that every business in the city has 3 layers, what it tells you, what you can figure out, and what you'd rather not know. He looks back at you. I suppose I'm asking which layer the pies are in. The middle one, you say. The layer you can figure out if you think about it, but you don't have to. He's quiet for a moment. That's honest, he says. I try. He nods once, as if something has been resolved that he'll think about later. Tell Crispy his pies are still good, he says. He walks away down the street, not looking back, already on his way to wherever the evening's taking him. You watch him go. The middle layer. You can figure it out, but you don't have to. You go back inside to help with the supper. Supper in the Crisp household happens late, later than in most working households, because the cookshop's fire doesn't truly die until the evening work is finished, and the evening work includes the prep for tomorrow that cannot be skipped, the beginning of things that need time to begin, and the quiet daily audit that Walter Crispy does of everything. The larder, the stores, the flour sack, the spice jars, before he will sit down and eat. You learn people by watching them do the thing they do every day. 2 years of watching Walter Crispy do his evening audit has told you things about him that no conversation has. He moves through the larder and the main room in a specific order that never varies. Flour first. He checks the level in the sack, runs his hand through the top of it, feeling for moisture, for anything that shouldn't be there. Then the spices. He opens each jar and smells it, not with the exaggerated performance of someone pretending to assess, but with the quick, unconscious sniff of someone who knows what each thing should smell like and is checking that it still does. The pepper, which should smell sharp and clear. The ginger, which has a particular heat to it even cold. The cinnamon. The cloves, used sparingly, kept in a smaller jar at the back. Then the fat. Then the salt. Then he opens the cold larder and stands in the doorway for a moment, not doing anything that looks like inspection, but actually checking everything. Temperature, smell, arrangement, the specific position of things that tells him if anything has been moved or used without his knowledge. He closes the door, he goes to the fire, he sits down. And only then does Agnes bring the food. Tonight it is pottage. Pottage is the meal that Tudor England eats. The way breathing is the thing Tudor England does. Constantly, without much ceremony, because it is the simplest and most efficient conversion of available ingredients into calories. Agnes's pottage is better than its definition suggests. The base is the stock from the pot that has been going all day. The long, slow cooking of bones and vegetables and herbs that runs alongside everything else in the cookshop's daily operation. Into this she has put oats, thickened until the whole thing has the consistency of something between porridge and soup, and onions, and a handful of dried peas soaked since yesterday, and something green from the bundle of herbs on the shelf. The bowls are wooden, The spoons are wooden. The bread beside them is yesterday's, harder than it was, but bread is bread, and a harder loaf makes a better vessel for pottage anyway, the way the crust catches the thick stock. You eat. The heat of the bowl through your hands is one of the simple good things of the evening. Your hands have been cold for parts of the day. The pump water, the morning lard, the cart handle in the early hours, and the warmth of the wooden bowl communicates itself directly through your palms in a way that is entirely separate from hunger, separate from the taste of the food, a physical comfort that is its own category of good. Alice sits across from you, eating with the focused efficiency of a child who's been running since 4 o'clock in the morning and who has approximately 45 minutes left before she reaches the end of herself. Walter Crispy eats without speaking. Agnes eats standing up, at the edge of the fire, her bowl in one hand, because in 2 years you have never once seen her sit down during a meal. You don't know if this is habit or necessity or a statement of some kind about her position in the household, which is simultaneously central to everything and officially secondary to her husband. She manages the kitchen, she bakes alongside you, she manages Alice. She manages the household accounts in a separate ledger that Walter Crispy refers to when he can't remember what something costs, and she eats standing up, watching the fire. The third batch tomorrow, Walter Crispy says, to no one in particular. I'll put it in at 8:30, Agnes says, if the oven's right. It's right when it's right. It's right when it's been built up properly from the start, which means the morning fire can't be rushed. She doesn't say this combatively. She says it the way people state technical facts in an ongoing conversation about logistics. If Thomas builds it slow and hot, by 7:30 we'll have the heat we need. Slow and hot, you say. Oak first, then ash. Don't rush the ash. You note this. Agnes's instructions about the oven are things you've been collecting for 2 years, with the same care that someone else might collect guild ordinances or market prices. They are empirical knowledge, built up through years of working this specific oven with these specific fuels in this specific building, and they are not written down anywhere. They exist in her head and now partly in yours. Someday, if you have your own cookshop, your own oven, you'll have to discover all of this again from the beginning, but you will start with more than nothing, the jar. You ask about it after supper when Alice has gone up to bed and Walter Crispy is in the front room doing something with the ledger, and it is just you and Agnes in the kitchen cleaning up. You have been thinking about how to ask this for several weeks. The question has a quality you don't want to give it, a suspiciousness, an implication that you are questioning something rather than simply wanting to understand it. But the old man's question this morning, what's really in them, has lodged in your mind in a way you can't unhook. Mistress Crisp, you say. She doesn't look up from the pot she's scrubbing. The jar you use in the filling, she scrubs. The dark one at the back of the shelf. She puts the pot down, picks up another one. I'm not asking because of Holt, you say. I'm asking because I want to understand what I'm making. Agnes is quiet for a moment. The fire crackles. Outside, the street is thinned to its evening version. Still people, still sound, but softer. The sharp commercial noise replaced by the more personal sounds of people going home, people heading to taverns, the occasional cart horse being stabled. It's verjuice, she says. You wait. And rendered onion. And something my mother used to make. I don't have a name for it. You cook down the onions in fat until they're almost black, almost burned, and then you add verjuice, which is pressed from unripe grapes, and you cook it down again until it's thick and dark and sour. She puts down the second pot. The sourness cuts the richness of the fat. The bitterness of the almost burned onion adds depth. It makes the filling taste more of itself than it would otherwise. She looks at you now. My mother learned it from her mother. Her mother came from Burgundy, originally. She said it was a trick they used there to make meat taste like better meat than it was. She picks up the cloth and begins wiping the table. That's all it is. You let this sit for a moment. It's nothing to do with the quality of the meat, you say. It's entirely to do with the quality of the meat, Agnes says. It makes the filling taste like something worth eating, whatever goes into it. That's the point. She says this without apology and without shame. It is what it is. The old woman from Burgundy, 2 generations back, passing on a technique for making the best of what you have, a culinary inheritance crossing languages and borders and decades to end up in a clay jar on a shelf in a cookshop on Cheapside. You think about the boy who ate the pie in 4 bites and disappeared around the corner. Thank you, you say. Agnes wipes the table. Don't tell Walter I told you, she says. He thinks it's a family secret. It is a family secret. It was his mother's family that kept it, not mine. She says this with the particular flat tone of a woman who's been negotiating the terms of a marriage for 20 years and has worked out where all the lines are. I brought it here. He considers it is now. That's fine. It produces good pies. She hangs the cloth by the fire. Good pies feed people, she says. That's the thing that actually matters. She goes upstairs. You sit alone in the kitchen for a moment, the fire low, the smell of the day's cooking settled into everything. The walls, the table, your own clothes, and you think about the woman from Burgundy, making the best of what she had, in a place she'd come to from somewhere else, feeding people who didn't know her name. Walter Crispy finds you still, sitting there 10 minutes later. He has his coat on again, and the look of a man who has remembered something that needs doing. He looks at you with mild surprise, as if he'd expected you to be somewhere else. You're still here? Yes. Good. I need you to take something to Tooley Street. Your stomach drops slightly, not dramatically, more in the manner of a body that has been working since 4:30 in the morning and had just begun to calculate the distance to its bed. Tooley Street is south of the river. South of the river means the bridge or the boat. Now, you say, before 8, there's a man there who has something I need for tomorrow's batch. He holds out a wrapped package. It's small, perhaps the size of 2 fists, and dense. Give him this. He'll give you a bundle of something wrapped the same way. Bring it back. He puts money on the table. For the ferryman, he says. You look at the money. The bridge is backed up at this hour, he says, preempting the obvious question. Take the boat. He goes back to the front room. You look at the money. You look at the package. You pick up both. Put on your own coat. Thinner than Walter Crisp's. More of a jacket, really. Wool that has been washed enough times that it has lost the texture of wool and become something closer to a soft board, and go out into the evening. The Thames in July at evening is the city's other heartbeat. You reach it by going south through the warren of lanes that run between the main streets, each one narrower than the last, each one carrying a different strand of the city's smell. The tanneries near the riverfront, the soap boilers, the smell of the mud itself as the tide goes out, exposing the broad, dark banks of the foreshore where the mudlarks work in the half-light, looking for anything the river gives up. The mudlarks. You stop for a moment at the top of the steps leading down to the boat stairs and look at them. They are children mostly, though there are a few adults. Old men, women with their skirts knotted above the knee, working the exposed mud at low tide. They move slowly, methodically, bent almost double, their hands in the mud feeling for things they cannot see. Nails from old boats, pieces of rope, coins, bones that might sell to the bone boilers. Anything the river takes from the city and deposits here in the mud, these people collect. The Thames is London's rubbish dump, and its highway and its water supply and its source of food and its sewer, all at once, all in the same water. The river does not distinguish between these functions. The river just flows. The children in the mud are ankle deep. Their feet are bare. The mud is cold even in July, the cold of deep water and tidal exposure, and you can see it on their faces. Not misery exactly, but the particular blank concentration of people doing difficult work in difficult conditions, who have closed down everything that isn't essential to the task. You watch them for a moment. Then you go down to the boat's stairs. The ferryman is an old man who introduces himself as nothing, and sits in his boat with the solidity of something that has grown there. He looks at you. He looks at the package under your arm. He looks at the money in your hand. Tooley Street, you say. Halfpenny, he says. Walter Crispy gave you twopence for the ferryman. You give him the halfpenny. He rose. The river at evening has a character entirely different from the river in daylight. In daylight it is commerce, boats everywhere, goods everywhere, the visible machinery of a city feeding itself. In the evening it goes still in a way that the streets don't, because the streets never quite stop. The river traffic thins, the commercial boats are tied up. What moves on the water now are the ferrymen, the private boats, the occasional larger vessel working with the tide. The water is dark, not black. There's still enough light in the sky for the river to carry colour, a deep grey-brown that shifts as the boat moves through it. The smell of it comes up strongly in the evening, the particular low-tide smell of exposed mud and river life, salt and rot and something faintly mineral underneath. You sit in the bow of the ferry. The old man rows. The south bank approaches. Southwark, or the borough, as people usually call it, is the part of London that London uses for everything it doesn't want to see clearly. The theatres are here, or were before the last round of civic, concern about plays and their effect on public morals. The bear-baiting arenas, the houses that don't advertise their exact nature, the prisons, the clink, the Marshalsea, the King's Bench, within a few streets of each other, their walls visible even at this distance. This is where the city puts the things that need to exist, but that the city would prefer not to examine too carefully. Theatre and prison and animal combat and the flesh trade, all within a short walk of the bridge, all within reach of the respectable north bank, but separated from it by the river, which makes the separation both real and symbolic. First time south? The ferryman asks. No. He glances at the package under your arm. Business? Errand for my master. He nods. The oars move. What trade? Cook. Ah. He says this with the particular weight of someone filing information in a category they already have. Cooks do a lot of business south. The markets here are different. Different how? He looks at you briefly, with an expression that is not quite a smile. Less asking, he says. He brings the boat to the south bank stairs and you disembark. Tooley Street runs parallel to the river, close enough that you can smell the water all along it. It is a street of working businesses, Warehouses, workshops, the kind of trade that requires space and doesn't need to be pretty about it. The buildings are older here than on Cheapside, lower, more haphazard, built at different times by people with different amounts of money and different amounts of care. You find the address by counting doorways from the corner, the way Walter Crispy described it. Third door from the chandler's. The chandler's smells unmistakably of wax and tallow, and the kind of controlled burning that is its whole existence. The third door is unmarked. You knock. The man who opens it is shorter than you expected. Perhaps 50, with the compact build of someone who has done physical work their whole life and has not stopped. His hands are, like the old man's, stained. Not ink, not tallow, something darker and more complex. He looks at you. He looks at the package. Crispy's boy. Yes. He holds out his hand. You give him the package. He weighs it briefly in his palm, not with scales, just with his hand, the judgment of someone who knows what things should weigh. And then he goes back into the doorway, leaving you standing in the street. You wait. The street is quiet here. 2 men are talking outside the chandler's, their voices low. A dog sits in the opposite doorway watching you with the alert patience of a dog that has learned to watch things in case they turn into food. The man comes back with a bundle. It is wrapped in the same cloth as the package you brought. It is heavier than you expected when he puts it in your hands. For the morning batch, he says. What is it, you say? He looks at you for a moment. Dried herbs, he says, and some other things. Crisper knows. He closes the door. You stand in Tooley Street with the bundle in your arms, and it smells, faintly, through the cloth, of something you cannot entirely identify. Spice, yes. Something dried. Something that has been kept for a while in a dry place. And underneath that, something faintly sweet and faintly sharp at the same time. The kind of smell that hovers at the edge of recognition without landing. You carry it back to the river. The ferryman is gone, replaced by a different one. Younger, faster, already pushing off before you've fully settled. The return crossing is quicker. The tide has turned while you're in Tooley Street, and the current is with you now, the river running northeast toward its mouth, and you move with it, the boat lighter on the water, the south bank receding. The city opens up ahead of you as you cross, and this is the moment, mid-river, the south bank behind, the north bank growing, when London does the thing it does, the thing that catches you even after 2 years, even when you're tired and your back aches and the bundle in your arms is heavier than it should be. The city opens up ahead of you, and it is, at this hour, in this light, beautiful. The word feels wrong for Tudor London, wrong for a city that smells the way it smells, and is built the way it's built and does the things it does. But the light of a July evening on the north bank of the Thames is not interested in what the city actually is. The light does what it does. It catches the spire of St. Paul's, a diminished but still vast, and turns it gold. It catches the stones of the Tower of London to your left, the great white fortress squatting at the river's edge, and makes them warm rather than cold. It catches the windows of the bankside houses and strikes sparks off them, so that for a moment the whole south end of the bridge looks as if it's on fire, as if the old disaster is happening again. The bridge has burned twice. The city has burned in sections too many times to count. But it's only the light, only the evening doing what evenings do. The dome of the sky above all of it, clear tonight. The clouds that covered the morning sun gone east with the wind. A blue deepening towards something closer to violet. The first stars, just beginning to be visible in the east. You're 16 years old, and you're in the middle of the Thames on a summer evening, and the city is spread out in front of you, and despite everything, the aching back and the cold water of the morning and the conversation with Roger Holt and the question that has been sitting in you all day about which side of the line things are on, despite all of it, you feel the thing you felt the first week you were here, when everything was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. You are here. You are in it. This enormous, impossible, functioning disaster of a city has let you in, is letting you move through it, is feeding you and working you and confusing you and occasionally frightening you, and you are, in some sense that you don't have the words for yet, becoming part of it. The ferry bumps against the north bank stairs. You climb up. The walk back through the evening streets takes 20 minutes. The city in the hour before dark has a quality of gathering. People going inward, toward fire and shelter and food, the outward commerce of the day contracting toward the private spaces of evening. Shops shuttered. The last vendors packing their carts. The streets not empty but moving differently. The movement purposeful, directed, people with specific destinations rather than the multi-directional drift of the trading day. You walk quickly. The bundle is awkward. You've tucked it under your left arm and it wants to slip. You have to keep adjusting it. And your back registers every step with the dull insistence of something that has been ignored all day and is now requiring acknowledgement. But you stop once, at the corner of Cheapside and Friday Street, because you hear music. It comes from somewhere inside an alley, a narrow space between two buildings, barely wide enough to walk through single file. It's a single instrument, something stringed. A lute, perhaps, though the sound is slightly different from the lutes you've heard before, slightly fuller, slightly more resonant. And a voice, a man's voice, low and unhurried, singing something you don't recognize. Not a ballad. You know the shape of ballads, the narrative structure of them, the way they build. This is something older in character, more cyclical, a melody that turns back on itself and starts again, the same phrases returning but slightly changed each time, the way a river returns to the same shape but with different water. You stand at the mouth of the alley and listen for a moment. You cannot see who is singing. The alley is dark and the music comes from somewhere back in it, invisible. Nobody else is stopping. The street moves past you on both sides without curiosity. This is either a familiar sound to them or an irrelevant one. Music in an alley on a Wednesday evening in London in 1557 is either someone's business or their pleasure, and either way, it's their own. You listen for another moment, then you go on. Walter Crispy is reading when you get back. Reading is not something you see him do often. He has a book, not a printed book. Or if it once was printed, it's been repaired and supplemented so many times that the boundaries between original and edition are no longer clear, and he's sitting by the fire with it open in his lap, though his head is tilted at an angle that suggests he's looking at the fire more than the page. You put the bundle on the table. He looks at it. No trouble? No. He picks it up. Does the same thing the man in Tooley Street did. Weighs it in his hand. Nods. Good. He takes it to the larder. You hear the door close. He comes back without it. He looks at you. You should sleep, he says. 4 o'clock comes. Quickly. This is the closest thing to paternal concern you've received from Walter Crisp in 2 years of employment, and it catches you slightly off guard. Yes, you say. The oven, he says, returning to the practical. What Agnes said. Oak first, don't rush the ash. Oak first, don't rush the ash. He nods. Goes back to his book. You go downstairs. The cellar is as you left it. The straw, the cold floor, the smell of the building's lower depths, earth and smoke and fat and the faint mineral breath of the stone walls. Your body knows this room the way it knows the cart's crossbar, the way it knows the particular resistance of the oven door on cold mornings. Not fondness exactly, recognition. You sit on the edge of the straw for a moment and take off your shoes. The laces first, the 3 pieces of twine, untied carefully in reverse order. The left shoe held together, still, its sole intact, which is today's small victory. You'll oil the leather when you have a moment, which you tell yourself every few days without doing it, and the leather tells you, through its increasing stiffness, that it is taking note. You take off the jacket. The shirt underneath is damp at the back from the day's work. Not wet, not the soaking of heavy labour, but the accumulated moisture of 12 hours of physical activity, of the afternoon sun and the walk and the ferry. You hang it over the rafter above you. Cold air on your back. Brief and good. Your hands. Before you lie down, you look at your hands in the dim light that comes through the gap at the top of the cellar door. They are not the hands you arrived with. The hands you arrived with were a Bedfordshire boy's hands. Farm rough, yes, used to outdoor work, but not to this. Not to the specific education of the cookshop. The morning laird, cold every day, has left a texture on your palms that wasn't there before. The cart crossbar has done something to the heel of each hand, a slight hardening, an extra layer of skin that wasn't asked for but showed up anyway. The body building its own answers to the questions the work keeps asking. There are burn marks, small ones, on the back of your right hand. From the oven peel, on the mornings when you move too fast and the iron at the end catches the edge of your wrist. From the pot, once, badly. You know the positions of these scars the way you know the positions of the loose cobblestones on your route. Your fingers know things now. They know the difference between pastry that needs more water and pastry that has enough. They know the temperature of a properly rested oven by feeling the air at the opening. They know the weight of a pie that's cooked through versus one that needs another 5 minutes, the slight difference in density, in the way it sits. This knowledge is not in your head. It's in your hands, in your fingers and palms and the specific muscles of your forearms that have been developed by 2 years of working cold fat and pushing heavy wheels over uneven stone. This is what an apprenticeship is. Not the information. The information is available in books, in conversations, in the guild ordinances that Walter Crisper has shown you. The apprenticeship is the making of a body that knows things, the slow, deliberate daily education of flesh and bone in the specific requirements of a trade. Your hands are not done yet. They'll keep changing. They'll keep learning. In 3 more years, when your apprenticeship ends, they'll know things you can't currently imagine. You lie down on the straw. The sounds of the city come through the floor, above and through the small gap at the street level, and down to where you are lying, and they arrive changed, filtered, softened by stone and wood and distance into something that is no longer the city's urgent commerce, but is instead just presence. The city being there, still existing, still moving because the city never entirely stops. A cart on the street above, late, the wheels loud in the quiet. Voices, brief, going past. The particular sound of a tavern somewhere close enough to be audible. Not the words, not even individual voices, just the collective hum of people in an enclosed space together, the thermal sound of human proximity and conversation, and behind all of it, just barely, if you're still enough to listen, the river. The Thames, 3 streets away, too far to hear directly, but the city around it carries something of it. The moisture in the air, the slightly salt edge underneath everything else. You've been aware of the river every day since you arrived. At first, it was just a fact. The city had a river. It was large and important, and you had to cross it sometimes. Then it became a reference point. The river was where you oriented from, where you knew you were in relation to the rest of the city. And now it's something else, something more interior, the way long familiarity changes a thing. The river is part of the background of your mind. You lie on your back and the straw rustles and settles around you. You think about the day, not reviewing it exactly, not going through it with the ledger mind that Walter Crispy applies to his evenings, just letting it come back in pieces, in the disordered way that things come back when you're tired. The bread weigher and Robert Ashe's face pale as dough. The cook from Leadenhall turning the pie over to check the bottom. Roger Holt's bookkeeper writing something you'll never read. The old man from Milk Street sitting against the cathedral wall, his pale blue eyes. Horse you can taste. Dog is sweeter than you'd expect. The line that everyone in this city navigates daily, without discussion. The boy with the 2 farthings, the man who asked which layer the pies were in. Agnes standing by the fire, eating, not sitting. Her grandmother from Burgundy, 2 generations back, cooking down the onions until they're almost burned, adding the verjuice, making the best of what she had. The river in the evening light, the south bank, the music from the alley that you didn't stop to see the source of, your hands on the cart crossbar, the ache in your back that is already beginning to loosen now that you're horizontal, the muscles releasing with the slow relief of tension that has been held all day and is only now being allowed go. Here is the thing about a day like this one, in a city like this one, in a year like this one, that the history books don't say clearly. It is not dramatic. Not most days. Most days are the labour and the cold water and the cart and the familiar faces on the familiar streets and the money going into the pouch and the count at the end and the supper and the sleep. The drama is intermittent. The drama comes and goes, sometimes a week of nothing but the ordinary, then something that catches in the mind and stays, a face, a phrase, a smell at the end of a dark alley. But the ordinary is the texture. The ordinary is what the days are actually made of. The extraordinary things that history remembers about this year. The burnings, the persecutions, the politics of Mary's marriage to Philip of Spain, the theological arguments that are costing people their lives in the market squares of provincial towns. These are happening. They are real. They are the framework inside which your day is taking place, but they are not your day. Your day is the pies, the cart, the cold water and the warm oven and the cold crossbar and the warm bowl of pottage and the question of what is really in the filling and the answer that everyone in this city has arrived at by long practice and tacit agreement, which is enough, good enough, the best that can be managed with what is available. This is not cynicism. This is not resignation. This is the knowledge that 500,000 people have to eat every single day, and that the system for feeding them is imperfect and always has been, and that the people who work within that system The bakers and the pea-men and the women from Burgundy with their clever jars and the boys pushing their carts through the cold morning streets are doing something real and necessary and ongoing, and that the fact that it is ordinary does not make it unimportant. It might actually make it more important. The extraordinary moments get recorded. The ordinary ones feed people. You're very tired now. The straw has the yielding warmth of something that has been slept on before, that carries the residual heat of the previous night and the night before, generations of sleep layered into it like the wear on the cart handle. Not comfortable in any absolute sense, but yours. The specific contour of the place where you lie, the specific way the straw shifts under your shoulder and hip. Your eyes are open, but the darkness is complete enough that open and closed are nearly the same. The sounds above you are spacing out, the city thinning toward midnight. The cart that went past earlier is gone. The tavern has quieted by a degree. The voices on the street are occasional now rather than continuous, each one separate and brief, and then absorbed back into the quiet. You think about tomorrow. 4 o'clock. The fire. Oak first, don't rush the ash. The fat cold in the crock. The flour in the trough. The first batch in the oven before the city is properly awake. The root. The crossbar in your hands. The cold cobblestones under the wheels. Milk Street. Agnes's jar. The line that everyone knows and everyone navigates. The river in the morning, before the sun has cleared the rooftops, when the light is grey and level, and the whole city smells of itself without any of the compensating smells that the day adds. The same as yesterday, the same as every morning for 2 years, and for however many mornings stretch ahead, the same as the morning after tomorrow. And there is something in this sameness that is not. You search for the word and find it in the way your body is relaxing now, muscle by muscle, the day's work releasing out through the straw and into the ground. There is something in this sameness that is not nothing. You think about the woman from Burgundy. She came from somewhere else to somewhere else. She brought what she knew with her. She made the best of what she found. She passed what she knew to her daughter, and her daughter passed it to Agnes, and Agnes uses it every morning in a cookshop on Cheapside, and it makes the pies taste like something worth eating. She's been dead for 50 years, probably. She has left no record, no book, no guild membership, no mark in any ledger anywhere. She has left a technique, passed hand to hand, spoken in a kitchen, demonstrated and observed and absorbed into someone else's hands, and then passed on again. The boy who ate the pie in 4 bites this afternoon will not remember the name Walter Crispe. He will not know the name Agnes or the woman from Burgundy or you. He was hungry, and there was a pie, and the pie was what it was supposed to be, hot and spiced and filling, and he ate it and was fed. That happened. That is real. That is the invisible record, the one that doesn't get written down, the one that's kept in stomachs and hands and the accumulated weight of bodies that were fed because someone built the fire at 4 o'clock and rolled the pastry cold and pushed the cart through the cold morning streets and called out into the noise. The church bells strike somewhere above and behind you. You count without meaning to. 10, 11, 11 o'clock. 5 hours until you need to be up. The mathematics of sleep. You close your eyes. The darkness is the same either way, eyes open or closed. The darkness is the same, and under it the city breathes. The river breathes. The 500,000 people in their beds and their doorways and their alleys breathe. And the whole of it rises and falls with a rhythm you've stopped being aware of consciously, but that is somewhere underneath the conscious, part of the rhythm of your own breathing now. The city breathes. You breathe. The smell of fat and smoke and flour. The particular cold of the cellar. The sound of the city going quiet by degrees, like a fire banked down for the night. Not out, not finished, but resting. The weight of the day settling, not gone. The day doesn't go away when you sleep. Tomorrow morning it will be there again in your hands and your back, in the texture of the cart handle and the temperature of the pump water. The day is continuous, one day flowing into the next, the same fire built again from yesterday's coals, the same route through the same streets, the same faces at the same times, the same, but also not the same, also different in the ways that days are different, in the ways that cannot be predicted. Who will stop at the cart, what the bread weigher will find, what the man in Tooley Street's bundle will turn out to be when Walter Crispy opens it tomorrow, what the old man from Milk Street will say when you pass him on Wednesday, what Alice will bring with the second batch, what the river will smell like tomorrow evening when the tide goes out. The city is the same city it was this morning, and you are slightly different from who you were this morning. This is how it works. This is the accumulation, day by day, pie by pie. Let the sounds go. The cart. The cart is in the alley, the wheels oiled, the interior clean, the straw fresh. It will be there in the morning. It will be waiting in the cold of the pre-dawn alley, patient in the way of objects that have no choice but to wait. The crossbar worn smooth where hands go. Let it go. The pies. The batch in the larder, wrapped, ready for the morning. The spices in their jars. The fat in its crock, going hard in the cold of the larder, waiting for the first warmth of morning hands to soften it again. Let it go. The money in the pouch on the shelf above you. Counted and recounted and accurate and enough. Let it go. The line. The question of the line and which side of it things are on, and whether the old man is right that Walter Crispy knows where it is. The question you'll carry for as long as you work this trade. The question that doesn't resolve, that sits in the space between what things are and what they're called. Let it go for tonight. Everything you carried today, through the streets and across the river and into the evening, all of it can be set down here, in this cellar, in this dark. You've earned that. The fire is banked. The oven is cooling. Agnes is asleep upstairs and Walter Crispy has closed his book, and the street above your head is nearly quiet now, and the river is doing what it always does, carrying the city's weight downstream, out toward the estuary, out toward the sea, out toward the places you'll never see. The spice routes and the ships and the distant sources of the ginger and the pepper that sit in their jars waiting for tomorrow's batch. All of it is happening. All of it is continuing without your attention. You can let it. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a place to be in the morning. You have hands that know what they're doing. You have a trade that is slow and honest and imperfect and necessary. You have the river 3 streets away, breathing with the tide, and the bells that will tell you when to wake, and the straw that knows the shape of you, and the darkness that is the same in a cellar in London in 1557 as it is everywhere and always, complete and restoring and temporary. The darkness is temporary. 4 o'clock comes, but 4 o'clock is later. 4 o'clock is later. The city keeps its own time, and for now, for this small window between the last bell and the first, The city and you are doing the same thing, resting, just resting. Let the walls hold the warmth they have. Let the coals keep their heat. Let the wheels wait in the alley and the straw release one last breath of the day's warmth into the air around you. Let tomorrow come when it comes. For now, just this, just the quiet, just the dark, just the steady rhythm of the city that has been here for centuries, will be here for centuries more, feeding people and confusing people and grinding people, and occasionally, in the evening light on the river, turning briefly and unreasonably beautiful. Centuries from now, someone will stand where you've stood today, on Cheapside, on the ferry stairs, in the narrow alley where the music came from. They will breathe the air of a different London, cleaner in some ways, stranger in others, and they will not know your name or Walter Crisper's name or Agnes's name. But the city will remember, in the way cities remember, in the shape of the streets, in the weight of old stone, in the river that is still the same river, running the same course to the same sea. And somewhere in the deep sediment of this place, under everything that will be built and burned and rebuilt, somewhere down there, your hands are still moving, still rolling pastry, still oiling the wheel, still gripping the crossbar in the cold of the pre-dawn alley, still feeding people, still on the street, still calling out, hot pies, fresh this morning, lamb and ginger, hot, good night.